Hello and welcome to a chilly Ardennes, the 89th running of the famous classic Liege, Bastogne Liege, the oldest of all of the classic races. It began back in 1892 and today brings the classic season to a close, and that's not normally the case because that's usually reserved for the Amstel Gold Race. Changes in the calendar, and it now means that the Liege, Bastogne Liege will end the early season classic racing. I'm Phil Liege, joined in commentary by Paul Sherwin. Earlier today, the start with Jan Ullrich, still looking for the form that will take him to a possible win in the Tour de France. And he's saying he's looking for a good finish in the leading group today.
Well, a fantastic performance this week by Jan Ullrich, Phil, because that winner there on Kolm, I think, will obviously make him feel that he's got a very good chance of getting back up to the top and maybe being a challenger in the Tour de France later this year to Lance Armstrong. But I don't think anybody expected this man to be on the start line. We were told a couple of days ago he'd broken his collarbone. David Rebellin is on the start. A quick visit to a chiropractor here in Belgium, and we'll see how he performs. Axel Merckx, always a favourite with the crowds.
One of three leaders on Lotto today with Peter van Petegem and this rider, Rick Verbrugge. So they've got a three-pronged attack to try and continue the great form being shown in these last couple of weeks by the Lotto riders, not least by this man here, Peter van Petegem. The World Cup leader, he's had two good positions in this race in the past couple of years, so it's a course that he could score more points in the World Cup competition. Already the leader there.
Well, everybody, I think, expecting a big start here in Liège. It's a race of 258 kilometres. And I think looking here at Francesco Casagrande, a lot of riders feel a little worried about the rain clouds which are threatening this part of Belgium at the moment.
Well, they can expect a headwind all the way down to Bastogne, and on the way back, which is where we'll pick up the action, it should be quite a rapid race. There are rainstorms around, and the chill factor is probably making it feel a lot cooler than the 10 degrees Celsius, that's 50 degrees Fahrenheit at the moment. But all the riders in good form at the start line in Liège. And Seiko also, having had some great second places in Milan-San Remo and Paris-Roubaix, finally landing the win in Flèche-Wallonne earlier in the week with Mikel Astarloa.
Well, that was Danilo De Luca there, a man I think's got a very good chance this afternoon. He's also one of the highest ranked riders with 5 stars to his credit as a possible winner of this bike race. A former two-time winner here on the podium, though, Michele Bartoli. Wondering how his form is at the moment, Phil, after breaking his hip early on in the season. A man also likely to be in with the challenges towards the end, Michael Bogart. An ongoing story between him and Rabobank and, of course, Lance Armstrong.
Yes, Rabobank very annoyed that Lance was chasing down Michael Bogart in the Amstel Gold Race, everything he did, but a big round of applause here for Lance. He says that he's looking forward to the race. The weather's the same for everybody. Very typical comments from the American, giving nothing away before the start this morning. This was the rollout as the riders now head out onto the race course. The whole distance of the race is 258 kilometres, which is 161 miles. And by tradition, 10 climbs on the route, all except one on the way back. As we now join the live action, I can tell you they've gone over the Côte de Saint-Roch on the way down to Bastogne. Here's the area around Stavelot now and Stocco. We're getting a first glimpse at low level of the leaders, so this should be very interesting for us now as they start to come through here. Now this is all scurry for the climb, and it looks to me as though that, Paul, the 7 leaders have been caught up by 5 more there. Because we saw Victor Hugo Peña just sitting towards the back of the race. And the Rabobank rider here right now is Oscar Frere. Now there's a little bit of a surprise. Was it Frere?
I think it was Marcus Zeberg on the back there. And he was looking to try and get across. This is what Stocker is like, 22% at the highest part of the climb. It's an average of 9.6, but it's very difficult at the base of the climb because of this cobblestone section. Here we're looking at one of the riders who was in the early move this morning. And there's been a serious change in the whole of the composition at the front end of this peloton, because the Landbau Credit rider here we're looking at, in fact, is Vladimir Duma from the Ukraine.
Well, he must have come across the gap for sure. This is Duma, and it is Zeberg just behind him. They hit a little stretch of cobblestones to shake them back up into life as they continue now to keep the pressure on. That peloton is not very far behind, and I expect to see them unleash some pressure. We've had a sight of Lance Armstrong back in the main field, so he's still very much in there. As we see the Lamprey riders here. Now this is the remnant of the break. This is Pinotti, one of the original breakaways, and Peña is still here, and Elmiger.
Well, Hugo Peña was in that early breakaway this morning, obviously sent out on the attack by Lance Armstrong to make sure that the US Postal Service had a rider represented in the early morning breakaway. That's always par for the course here at Liège-Bastogne-Liège. A lot of riders trying to gain themselves a bit of glory. And these riders, the 7 men who had initially escaped, built themselves up a lead at one stage of almost 10 minutes. But we're now back with the main field. In the middle there, you can see the man in the white jersey is Michele Bartoli, looking very comfortable here, a former 2-time winner. I think on the left-hand side there, we also got a glimpse there of Frank Vandenbroek riding fairly close to the front end of the main field as well. But this is Martin Elmiger, one of the riders who was in the leading group earlier on, the leading group of 7, and he now almost certainly going towards an early shower.
Yes, Elmiger out in front in the 48th kilometre today with Pinotti, who's still up there, and Peña. And Vaugrenard, a new name on the block, Française de Jeu, new professional for that team, which is having an excellent season.
There is the monument just at the top there, the monument at the top of the Stokke, and that I think is to Stan Ockers.
And steady climbing here by Asteloa. So the initial selection not coming, just keeping the pressure on here. This is the climb of the wall. The Côte du Stokke leaves us with about 170 kilometres covered and 88 to go.
Cédric Vasseur on the left-hand side, the Frenchman on the Cofidis team. And at the summit of this climb, it's a very interesting monument to Eddie Merckx as well. And Eddie was not very happy when they actually put the monument up there. He said, I thought they only put monuments here for dead men.
The gap is only about 50 seconds to what are 9 leaders. Duma is up there, Zeberg, Gerrit Glomser, Nicky Sorensen, Luca Paolini. They're the ones we've managed to nail down. It looks as though we've got a rider here from Telecom in the frame as well. But the gap is nothing yet.
Looks like Bobby Julick's the rider from Telecom who's made the junction there with that leading group of 9 riders. We're now beginning the Côte de One at Ranval. 9.4% average gradient, but 15% at the steepest part. And then after that, we will drop down into the valley and head along a fairly flat, undulating road till we get to the climb of the Côte de Rosier. This is Perron on the front, Zeberg up alongside him, Bobby Julick just at the back. They're bringing in the referee's car there, so the gap must be hovering around the 30-second mark at the moment. These are very difficult roads. Although these climbs are not the huge big climbs of the Alps or the Pyrenees, these roads are certainly what you would call leg breakers.
We'll all second that. There's Andrea Perron. He's had some good form this year. 1 kilometre to the top then of the Côte de Ranval, which means we're past to 83 kilometres here. These are the 9 front runners, just tagged on the back. Gerrit Glomser. And the gap just over 50 seconds. In fact, all the cars are coming in there now. It may have just cruised up to the minute mark. Get some idea of the gradient of the climb now as they start to ride this one out of the saddle. Glomser sticking to the rear, and just in front of him we've got Nicky Sorensen. Well, his brother won this race a few years back. He was the last rider to win for Denmark in 1993. That was Rolf, of course, who's now working for Danish television as a commentator. He's got the easy job now.
Well, they've brought in the neutral service car, but I think the referees are getting just a little bit nervous there. It's surprising to see all of the work that's been done on the front end of this main field by Team Cofidis, because I don't really see them as having a leader for Liège-Bastogne-Liège today, Phil, although Nico Martin feels he's got a chance of getting himself into one of the top 10 placings. But there's still a very large main field keeping themselves together. I think that's Armstrong down there in about 20th position for the moment, just keeping himself to the front end of the main field as much as out of danger as he can. And that 30-second time gap, I think, is probably a lot closer now to 20.
I think Cofidis, there's a lot of unrest within the team at the moment. The Belgian element want to go. David Miller's openly criticised the squad. He's out with injury at the moment, hopes to make his return very shortly and start his build-up for the Tour de France. The team could do with a good result to wipe away all these rumours, I think.
Well, looking at the back end of the main field here, you get an idea just to see what sort of a race Liège-Bastogne-Liège is. For the moment, it very much is a war of attrition, with riders just being shot off the back, with the incredible pace that's being set on the front end of the main field by the Cofidis riders. Once they eliminate several riders here on these roads, which are very difficult roads indeed, there will be a serious sorting out when they get to the outskirts of the town of Sprimont for the Côte de la Redoute, because I think that's where the race really will start to unfold. But these guys on the front here, Phil, are all taking a very serious look on the situation at Liege, Bastogne, Liege. There is Francesco Casagrande. Just behind him is Ivan Basso, another man from Fassa Bortolo, who could be a surprise winner of this bike race towards the end. He's in very good form right now. Chance to see that the sun is trying to come out here at Wanne. There you just see the yellow car through the crowds there. That's the neutral service vehicle. And in fact, it looks as if they've pulled the neutral service vehicle from behind the breakaway of 9 riders, which indicates the gap must have come down inside of the 30-second mark.
Nice shot there of Bobby Julich in that breakaway. He's having a good week's cycling. He was in the action too in the flesh. Now an attack coming off the front here. Now Coffin is very anxious to get something moving here. Now they can't get much closer in the camera than that.
Cedric Vasseur jumping out of the front end of the main field. I tell you what, in that small group of riders off the front end of the peloton, there was a certain man by the name of Lance Armstrong, so he already is paying a serious amount of attention to the front end of the peloton. He obviously has a feeling that the race might split up over the summit of the Côte de Rosier.
These are the leaders we're with now. A nice glimpse there of Bobby Julich, and just coming through here is Duma and Udo Boltz. He'll be dictating the race pattern here, and probably passing over words of wisdom. We almost have something in common. His birthday's the day before mine.
Well,
but a different year, of course.
I was going to say that.
You might, yeah.
I was trying to be polite. No, Boltz is a great bike rider, and he will be 37 years of age in August. But just looking down on the main field there right now, you can see they really are putting the hammer down. I think rattled a little bit by that acceleration. Looking down, the best place to be, you can see, is obviously in the first 5 or 10 places, because the guys in the back of the main field right now are scrambling to stay on the wheel in front of them, and it's a very difficult and dangerous place to be, because sometimes you take risks, and that's when the accidents start to happen. This is the counter-attack, and they are certainly riding exceptionally well together.
Heavy clouds, grey, but if there is going to be any rain, I don't think it'll be too severe. Passing shower maybe. But Seiko now sending up a good strong man in Alexander Scheffer from Kazakhstan. And to join Gerrit Bloms are already up there. This is a very similar move that they were using in Flèche Wallonne, and it worked out because the breakaway, unusually so, never got brought back. And Arsteloa won the day. First time a Spanish rider's ever won that race. Came close the previous year with Unai Echeverria from Venezuela, but Spanish speaking, but not from Spain. There's the gaps now, 13 seconds. So it looks as though this little chase group might bridge, but throw a blanket over the lot, I think, just now.
It's all still very close together. The main field are not too far behind that counter-attack of 4 riders, and that's a good situation for the main field to be in, because those 4 riders in front are almost like the carrot in front of the donkey, and it's not more than 10 seconds right now as they accelerate to pull back those men. They realize that if those 4 men can bridge the gap, they're now looking at a slightly different situation out on the road, because Mario Ertz is a very tough bike rider. I would think joining up with Bobby Julich at the front end, Julich would be able to find some extra firepower to dig into the possibility of extending their advantage over the main field. I do, however, feel that it's all going to come back together before we get to the start of the serious climb towards the summit of the Côte de Rosier. And of course, I think we're going to see a large peloton once again charge into the bottom of the Côte de la Redoute, and that's where the big names will have to come forward and show what they've got in their legs.
I think this is down to Stavelo again and out it once more. We're waiting for Rosier to start now. To the next climb. They should get across, but I think when they do bridge, they're going to be taking the peloton with them. They're the 9 leaders. It's slightly more than the gap, I think, than they just told us, but even so, the peloton's coming up quite quickly on Echeverria and Ertz. There's the 4 chasers. They're anxious to get across, and they're working hard. I'm sure Bloms is not doing much up there right now. He is number 14, third from the back. Luca Paolini has done nothing in this breakaway since he joined it, but he's just sitting there hoping for reinforcements from the rear. Hasn't got the firepower yet.
You can see the weather conditions starting to change as well, because there's a small amount of mist coming down from this very low cloud here, and this really does bring down the temperature in this part of the world. The Ardennes, in fact, the highest point of Belgium, is not too far away from where these riders are right now. You can see that the counter-attack are looking over their shoulders. They're realizing they're not opening up any advantage over the main field at all, and I think that will take the wind out of their sails. Here's the front end of the main field. Team of Francesco Casagrande being very attentive. There is Rubiera and Armstrong on the far side there, moving themselves to the front end of this peloton. I think Armstrong today is looking to try and put the name of one of the biggest classics onto his palmarès. Let's not forget, he has won a World Cup event in the past. He won San Sebastian a couple of years ago, and he also won the Flèche Wallonne and went on to finish second in Liege, Bastogne Liege. But I think he's looking to try and put a slightly bigger one-day classic onto his pedigree, because he's always felt that he's the kind of rider capable of winning a race like this.
Perfect course for him. This is the Côte de Rossier next. 13% at its steepest point. Take us up to 271. And we're not too far away with the leaders. We're about 4 k's, 3 or 4 kilometers from the climb itself. There's the peloton. And I think when we get there, they're pretty much going to be all together, because those are the 4 riders just out in front, about to lasso them and put them back in their place. Armstrong very attentive, and I really do believe that Armstrong certainly is thinking of a good result today. He'll have a little bit of competition, I'm sure of that, and remember, you've got to finish this race feeling very strong because of the climb which takes us up towards the finish.
This is a nice little incursion that the race organisation have put in, because in fact they leave Stavelot behind them, and they do a nice little circuit around Stowmore to go over the top of this climb here, the Côte de Rozier, before they drop down into the town of Liege, and that is where we'll have the final feeding station. That will be at 200 kilometers, leaving the riders with 54 kilometers to go to the finishing line. As you can see, the main field just slowing down a little bit. The fact that they're bunching across means that the accelerations are starting to subside, but as we say that, somebody else has decided they want to go off the front end of the main field.
Now they're still trying to reach these 4, but it won't be long now before they bring them back. One of the terrors of doing Liège-Bastogne-Liège from a helicopter is you can't always see the riders, because we're in some of the pine forests here of the beautiful Ardennes. And just up to the left of our picture now, that's a lovely picture as they come through the forest here. These are the leaders being led by Zeberg, and the 2 CSC boys right behind, keeping an eye on things. Nicky Sorensen and Perron just behind him.
Still, they don't have much more than 15 seconds advantage over the chasing group of 4, and about another 10 seconds back to the main field. Once they get to the summit of the Côte de Rozier, they will plunge back down into the valley, which they left only a couple of kilometers ago. Charge through the feeding station, 3 or 4 kilometers on the flat, and then another very difficult climb, the climb of the Côte de la Vecchie. Sorensen seems to be really giving it some hammer here, Phil, for the moment. Up into 3rd or 4th position is Andrea Perron. Udo Bolts, you see Bolts always riding at the front end of this group. He knows exactly where to position himself. His experience makes up for an awful lot, because let's not forget he is 36 years of age, one of the older bike riders, and we're looking here at the average speed of the race so far, a very fast average speed at 38.7 kilometers an hour.
Well, they got off, they covered 42 kilometers in the opening hour today, then they slowed a little bit as the headwind took its toll and the breakaway established itself down to the turn at Bastogne. But it looks like they might be pulling that back again now. I think we'll continue to increase in that average speed as we run to the finish with the favourable conditions. And the fact that the peloton has kept up a very high tempo here. They've not allowed this breakaway to get clear at all. And there's still only a few seconds covering the whole spread of the race. Still a compact peloton. 11 seconds is now the gap. Well, that's absolutely nothing as they're on the foothills now of the Rossier, taking us into the last 45 miles.
Well, slowly but surely it's all starting to come together. That group of 4 is only 11 seconds behind, and the gap back to the main field is not very much more than that either. This is Andrea Perron, former world team time trial champion, looking over his shoulder. Interesting to see whether Tyler Hamilton can do something on a stage, on a race like this. There is Paolini. He certainly was yo-yoing back and forward on that group. I think the terrain today certainly not very much to his liking.
Yeah, he never was happy in that breakaway. He was just sitting there at the back. He wasn't able to take part in it at all. As the riders now try to bring themselves a little bit closer. 11 seconds is nothing. It's who shuts the gap down, really, because at this stage of the race, they know the minute they shut this gap down, there will be more attacks to try and break up the field. Sitting around here at the front of the race is Francisco Ruiz, Spanish rider on Team Coast. Setting it up, I'm sure, today to give Jan Ullrich a real shot at a high finish. I won't say a win, but if he did win today, then the warning bells would be sounding all over the Ardennes for the upcoming Tour de France.
Well, Germany would go absolutely wild, I think, because they already were pretty excited last week when Jan Ullrich, and you can see Ullrich there just to the right-hand side in the light blue strip of Team Coast, riding very comfortably, Phil, for the moment. And when you think this man has been out of competition for 18 months with all kinds of not only physical but psychological problems, I think he's maybe got himself back onto the straight and narrow, because he's riding there like a Jan Ullrich of old. Absolutely.
I think mentally he is back. But after all the time he's had out, he's got a little bit of muscle power still to rebuild. But there's no doubt about the immense talent of Jan Ullrich. And if he finds his true form, then Lance Armstrong knows he's the most feared man in the professional cycling peloton. Lance was riding about 3 riders in front of him, so maybe the tables are turned at the moment, and Ullrich is judging himself by Lance's strength today, and he's keeping an eye on him. This is still Ruiz setting the pace for Team Coast. So obviously taking confidence in their leader today, in Ullrich.
Also, Cedric Vasseur having a pretty good ride today. He's in 3rd position there, the large coffee-dish rider. They're just picking up Mario Ertz there, and he is back in the main field. This bike race is all very much coming back together, and I'm certain we'll see the majority of the riders who are in this group charging now into the outskirts of the town at the bottom of the Côte de la Redoute. Ibernesto.com deciding to have a go right now. And it's rather confusing at the start of the season here, because the Ibernesto.com jersey is almost identical to the Rabobank colours when you see them out on the road.
Well, it looks as though he's got his souvenirs. Won't be from the race today, I shouldn't think, but possibly a crash in Fleshwell on there. Little group still. This is a new group trying to get away, and there was a US postal rider tagged on to the back. 14 seconds. There they are, the 9 riders who have dictated affairs since we got over the top of the Côte de Stocker. There'll be some changes now, I think. This is a change of guard at the front. There's 10 riders here now, so the Euskadel, I think, in fact, what has happened, the 4 bridged Echeverria, Ertz, Scheffer and Serrano. Now, we didn't see that bridge, but they've tagged on to the back because Serrano is certainly down there, the Once rider, and Scheffer is there as well. So that's what's causing concern with the chase group, but there's only a few seconds covering the lot.
Well, 14 to be precise at the moment. It really is a race that is very certainly going to come back together before we go very much further. But I think the pressure has been so much on since we came back from Bastogne that it's going to be a very decisive attack of the Côte de la Redoute here. There is Armstrong on the front, Phil, looking very attentive, and not too far behind is Jan Ullrich. So it's really quite amazing the way Ullrich has come back. This is a move from Francesco Casagrande.
Now this will cause a little bit of ripple of excitement amongst the riders. There's Bobby Julich just come back on the left of our picture from the leaders, deciding it's not worth the effort now because there is a strong effort being made by Casagrande and pulling clear at the moment. Now Casagrande is a feared rider when he's feeling confident, and he looks to me as though he's feeling pretty good right now. And just tagging on to the back there is Kessler. Now Kessler is a man. Now where are they? Oh, they're coming up to the breakaway. So this is quite a useful group now, about 11 riders.
Well, this is actually one of the men who Lance Armstrong said he felt was exceptionally strong last week in the Amstel Gold Race, Matthias Kessler. So he's a man they don't want to give too much of an advantage of here right now. They've jumped across the gap there. There is Echeverria. Serrano moving forward here. These are the remnants of what was the leading group, and in fact the rider from Sedermack here has also ridden himself across the gap and through onto the attack. The man we're looking at here is Eddie Mazzolini, who we've seen on many occasions in the past be a great attacking rider.
Yeah, well, he rode a great Fleshwell on. He was placed in that, and it looks as though Gerrit Glomser's feeling a bit fresher now. He's been hanging around the back, but there he was going up with Mazzolini. Because there's a sense here, change. Look at this. The peloton here is splitting and splitting now and trying to get up there amongst it. A decisive move here, I think, as we head towards the Côte de Rosier. There's the head of the peloton. Now, it's decision time for one or two riders, I think, because it's all your own work day. You've got to get out and join that leading group.
Thing to do right now is to accelerate into this corner and just charge down the descent, take a few risks to make sure that the whole of the race comes back together. One or two riders, I think, in difficulty there for a few moments, because you could see them looking the other way when people were starting to launch counter-attacks. So those are the climbs left to go: La Vecquée, La Redoute, Sprimont, Sartillemont and Saint-Nicolas, and of course the final climb of the day into the Côte d'Ons. Still an awful lot of climbing to go, Phil, before we get to the finish. And I tell you one thing, one or two riders starting to suffer on what has been a very upbeat tempo since we turned around down in Bastogne.
He's our old friend Eddie Mazzolini here, another man that's got great spring classic form, and he's come up, but the whole peloton look as though they're almost hooked up now. Long, thin, straight line. I think we're in for a very good finale today, because this is an active race here. Attack and counter-attack. They're allowing no breakaways to gain anything but maybe 30 seconds. Here comes the next rush off the front now, 63 kilometers from the finish. That's Kessler now moving up towards the leaders again.
Very dangerous move here right now. They're moving away from the summit of the Côte de Rosier. They'll drop down into the valley in the town of L'Aglaise, go through the feeding zone. About 3 kilometers of flat, then turn off the road, a left-hand turn, and head up another climb, the Côte de la Vecquée, before then dropping down and having a long, fast descent down the valley roads towards the Côte de la Redoute. It looks very much, though, Phil, as if it's all starting to come back together. These are very tricky roads here right now, because although it's not raining, a lot of these descents, because of the forested nature of this race route, are still very damp from the rain that's come over this part of Belgium over the last couple of days. Completely different to all of the other one-day classics we've had so far. This is probably the coldest day that the bike riders have had to contend with.
And how different is the country? We're in the same country of Belgium, and yet nothing like the cobblestones of the Tour de Flanders. This is a beautiful farmland area of the Ardennes. Well, if you're good and you feel good, this is a perfect course for you, because it is a strong man's route as we now return towards Liege. Still plenty of big climbs to come, but it's a tortuous route, and you have to really stay on the edge of your mettle. You can't afford to make a mistake. You must hold your position near the head of the peloton, because attack and counter-attack are coming all of the time. It's been a very, very active race in this peloton today. So far they've managed to repair the damage, but I wonder for how long. I think it's been a much harder lead up towards the final climbs of the day than in previous years, and I think we'll see the results of that when we get up towards La Redoute. That's the speed we're doing at the moment, varying between 65 and 71 kilometers an hour. A gentle speed downhill.
Yeah, very gentle, about 48 miles an hour, so it's not too bad, is it really? I think what's happening right now is there been a lot of riders getting left behind, and a lot of the teams are actually starting to see that their numbers have been reduced. And I'm trying to look down that line and see how many riders are still there from the US Postal Service. Armstrong, I think, towards the end of this bike race is going to have the difficulty of finding himself somewhat isolated, as are some of the other leaders too. Frank Vandenbroek is still in there, but he doesn't seem to have that many bike riders around him. So I think we could see a very serious group of 10 or 12 riders going clear over the Côte de la Redoute, and that would suit a lot of riders because they don't have the support of teammates over the last 25-30 kilometers.
The peloton is about 65 riders strong, so the field has been greatly reduced since we've made the turn down at Bastogne. It's become a strong man's field. We haven't seen either Michael Bogart, and he is the hot favourite for the Rabobank boys, and we haven't seen too much. Indeed, we haven't seen anything of Peter van Petergem, although he is in this group, reported earlier, sitting near the back of the group, but we haven't actually seen him.
Well, that's his kind of tactic in the early part of races, and he says a lot of people criticize him for that, but he says he's not able to fight and use all his nervous energy to stay at the front end of the main field. He would rather spend the first 120 kilometers sitting at the back end of the main field and then just move forward when it is much more important. I'm fairly sure he still is in this bike race, because after all, he actually finished 7th in Liege, Bastogne Liege last year. He's a very good bike rider, certainly a man who is a superb one-day bike rider, and I think that double of Paris-Roubaix and the Tour of Flanders went down pretty well in Belgium.
Well, if he's near the tail right now, he's leaving himself a lot of energy-wasting effort to get back up to the front. But there's the slowing at the head as they all start to reshape and rethink what's going on. The next stop for us will be the climb of the Côte de la Vecquet. That'll be 52 kilometers left to run, and there's another attack gone off the front.
Well, nobody wants to sit back here. This is a good place to attack. That looks like Axel Merckx going off the front right now. He's attacking just before the feeding station, and if he can go through there with 15 or 20 seconds advantage, there will be a general slowing down in the peloton behind, and he'll be able to open himself up 30 or 45 seconds before they go to the Côte de la Vecquet. But somebody's come straight across the gap there right now. They realize this is a very tactical maneuver here coming into the feeding station, and it looks as if that might be Rumsas has seen the gap there for Lampre, but the rest of the main field, Phil, they're not letting too much get off the front.
No, there's a lot of reaction here. Gerhard Steiner also sent a man across the gap. Here comes the Seiko boys, shutting it down if they can. Still very strong and still very confident that Danilo De Luca can win this one today. But the field all regrouping again at 2.5 kilometers to our next challenge in the Vecquet. And that'll take us into the last 50 kilometers or so to the finish. But of course the big climb getting closer and closer, because after we're over Vecquet, we've then got a 15-kilometer bridge before we come down into Remnichon and start the climb of La Redoute.
Another move by Rumsas here. He's obviously got itchy legs here this afternoon. He wants to try and blow the race apart before we get to the Côte de la Redoute. It's always very difficult, the approach there, because it's almost like a bunch sprint. Everybody knows you have to get to the bottom of La Redoute in the first 4 or 5 places, because the road is so narrowed by the number of spectators who come out to see this bike race at this point. Vasseur is very attentive too, Phil. He's been right at the front for the last 10 or 15 kilometers looking for some kind of breakaway to go clear, and there was a very attentive Rabobank rider, and a man that we've not seen too much of so far. That's Oscar Frere, the former 2-time world champion, so good to see him riding close to the front here.
It isn't a race of this nature, and again another man trying to pave the way for Michael Bogart perhaps. Here comes an attack again now from Vini Calderola. Well, this one certainly isn't Veinsteins, and I don't think it's Bortolami. Could be Oscar Masson, because he's the other member of this team who's also firing on all cylinders just now.
Everyone getting very nervous here. You see when their riders zigzag across the road like that, trying to see if they've got a gap between themselves and the main field, it indicates that a lot of nervousness is coming into the peloton. A move going straight through the feeding station there, again coming from Lampre. It's a very confusing and dangerous place going through the feeding zone here, and in a race like this it is so important, especially with these weather conditions, to make sure you take on board plenty of food and drink at a point like this. It's Rumsas again.
Yeah, she's definitely trying to get a group going here. Rumsas now is 31 years of age and living under the shadow, though absolutely no proof of any allegations of illegal use of stimulants, but of course he has that cloud hanging over him from his 3rd place finish in the Tour de France. But it's only in the last 10 days he's really started to look good again, and certainly last week in Flèche Wallonne he rode extremely well, and now he wants some results.
Juan Flecker, the Ibernesto.com rider at the back of the main field there, covered in bandages from a crash in the Flèche Wallonne just a couple of days ago. A lot of nervousness on the front end of the main field. Once they go over the summit of the Côte de la Vecquet, they have about 15 kilometers down towards the Côte de la Redoute, and that will be a very fast approach to La Redoute. And in fact, it's into the town of Sugny where they get to the foot of the climb.
Well, just looking here at all the faces, but I'll tell you what, Eddie Mazzolini almost got sandwiched out of that one, but he survived his journey through the feeding station. That's Giuseppe Guiarini, the man that was knocked off by the photographer Eric up on the top of Alpe d'Huez a couple of years ago, but he got up and he went on to win the stage of the Tour de France there. Now this is an attack here by Lotto, and it's not one of the top 3 riders that they're pinning all the hopes on today either, but he's trying to shape something up. There's a lot of riders willing to lift the pace here. They're sensing that something is going to happen shortly.
There's a big gap starting to appear here right now. Everybody's scrambling to stay in contact for the moment. Looking back down, you can see there's almost 35 seconds from the front end of the main field to the back of the group. But I think these guys now have decided they're going to sit down for a while, although it won't be too long before somebody else comes out to launch another attack. This is what it looks like at the back end of the peloton. This is Flecker on the back there with the white bandages from ibanesto.com. And the funny thing is that going through a feeding station at this point in a race as fast as that, it takes riders an awful long time to get all of the food into their back pockets.
Well, that's only a slight rise, but again it's hurting the peloton here. They try to get a little bit of a gap again. Vladimir Belli, the Lamprey boy, nearest camera, caused a little bit of damage, but well, he's caused quite a lot of damage as it turns out, because he split the field here.
Got a very good team here, Lamprey, with Francesco Gazzagrande, Belli, Misaglia, and of course Rumsas, who seems to be in excellent form right now. I think it will all come back together again before they turn off the road. It's, I think, if I remember correctly, a left-hand turn to the Côte de la Vecchie, and still a fairly large group, and still this incredible pace that we've had, Phil, ever since we came back from Bastogne. When we got down to Bastogne, there was a leading group of 7 riders who had an advantage of almost 10 minutes. And that got wiped out on the very rapid approach to the first major climb, the Côte de One, on the way back up towards Liege. But looking now down on the main field, they really are strung out in one very long line.
Well, this is turning out to be quite a charge here as we go through Stoumont and line up now for the Côte de la Vecchie. And still the riders are launching one attack after another here. They're determined to crack this field sooner or later. We're just onto the slopes of the climb now, 8% at the steepest point. So it's a nice little leg breaker, this one, and then it's a 15-kilometer charge towards La Redoute.
It's also a very long climb as well, almost 5 kilometers in length. Again, it looks like Cedric Vasseur is the man who's come out of the front of the main field there for the Cofidis team. He's having an exceptional day today. He's been in the first 15 places for the last 30 kilometers or so, and right now he's trying to open up some gap between himself and the rest of the main field. Probably trying to get the team a little bit of sponsorship after what has not really been one of their great one-day classic campaigns.
Well, he's got the ever-present Seiko riders to come and give him a hand. Now this one is a bit of an important move, because this is Igor Astalor again, winner of Flèche Wallonne, very confident. He told the world at the end that he felt he was a rider for the classics. Well, he's won one and he's had a couple of good second places now in classic races, so maybe he is. And still reflecting in the form of last Wednesday. But once more, a lot of riders marking the move here and all coming back together again.
Well, there's Michael Bogart on the left-hand side, the Rabobank rider. He's a man who expects to ride well here this afternoon. But a certain amount of animosity and rivalry coming on between him and Lance Armstrong, who chased him down almost every time he attacked in the Amstel Gold Race just a week ago. Now Vinny Calderillo again going out on the attack. But I tell you one thing, Phil, there are now appearing to be an awful lot of riders completely on the rivet in this main peloton, because a few moments ago everybody was jumping onto every attack that came out of the front, but now they're starting to count their efforts and make sure that the efforts they make are ones that are going to pay.
Well, this could be Oscar Masson this time, or the other on-form man in this squad is Steve Zampieri, the Swiss rider. We're going to find out now which one it is. As he goes past here, it's Oscar Masson. So he's the other rider, like Mazzolini, who shares the good form. And, well, he might have hit them right, because there's a little bit of a lull now, as there have been so many attacks. As Paul has said, this is a long climb up here through the forest, and it'll be a chance to try and build a little bit before you've got that long no man's land hike across to La Redoute, which hangs up near the main autoroute down through Liège, and always draws the biggest crowd of this race.
Domino Vacanze now putting the hammer on at the front end of the main field. This is a very difficult climb, the Côte de la Vecchie, 4.8 kilometers in length, an average of around about 5.5%, but it's 8% at the steepest parts. This is the leader, Alexander Kolobnev, a Russian rider on the Domino Vacanze team, looking over his shoulder to see what sort of damage he's done. But basically, for the moment, everybody just sitting there in his slipstream.
Well, these are the boys, remember, that they're racing too for a share in the Ardennais weekend group prize. Kolobnev also in the breakaway throughout Flèche Wallonne, and would feature very strongly as a man that could be seen as the winner of what they call the Ardennais weekend.
Well, Guarini at the front end of the group there, also being very attentive for Team Deutsche Telekom, trying to pull it all back together. Look at this, just getting out of the saddle. Jan Ullrich just going to show us how strong he is after 18 months out of the sport.
Yes, the big question mark, but one can feel the excitement here that we might be seeing Jan Ullrich return to his great form. This has been a tough race over these last 30 kilometres, and if you're still holding position near the front, then I think it's fair to say you're having a good day.
Kessler.
Yeah, looking very good. Remember, Kessler too, Paul, was placed in this race last year. He made a 6th place finish and about less than half a minute behind Bettini at the line.
He's had a very good season so far. He was very aggressive in Paris-Nice, and just a couple of weeks ago he got himself a win in the Grand Prix Miguel Indurain in Spain. And he's a man who Lance Armstrong reckoned was very strong indeed in the breakaway last week in the Amstel Gold Race.
Well, Lance tends to pick his men and keeps an eye on them. That's how he rides his races. He looks for the men on form who can be a threat. Names aren't so important as the men who have the current condition. And you never know at this time of the year, riders racing with different targets.
Well, Armstrong is a very good judge of men on form, but at the moment the bookmakers here in Belgium, because in Belgium you can actually bet on bike races, the bookmakers have Lance Armstrong down here as the #1 favourite to win this bike race with odds of 5 to 1. Then queuing up behind him are Bogart and De Luca at 6 to 1, and just behind them Bartoli and Frank van den Broeke at 9 to 1. Ullrich is a long shot at 22 to 1, but I tell you what, watching this bike race I would think those odds are starting to come down quite a bit right now, Phil.
I think if you weren't commentating, Paul, you could nip out and put a couple of bucks on for me, because Ullrich's looking rather good.
Completely different number of teams coming to the front here in this bike race right now. After seeing the men dominate the flatlands, this is a man we saw a lot of earlier in the season, especially in Paris-Nice, Samuel Sanchez from Euskaltel-Euskadi. Very good bike rider. These races suit the Spanish riders, and it's always a changeover from the one-day classics riders to the stage race riders when we come to races like the Amstel Gold Race and Liege, Bastogne, Liege, because these are the kind of races where those men come to test themselves for the first time. And very often in the past, Miguel Indurain, Greg LeMond, they used to use these races as a pointer to make sure that all of their preparation was on form for the big races like the Tour of Italy coming up, and of course for men like Lance Armstrong to make sure that he's on track for the upcoming Tour de France.
Reforming of the groupe de tête, those in front, or is this another little bit of the overstretching of the elastic? A big crowd there lining the left-hand side of the road, and they're seeing a very active race today.
These guys obviously don't want to wait for the Côte de la Redoute, because they're just now going over the summit here of the Côte de la Vecchie, and from here, 276 kilometers covered, we have about 15 kilometers to charge off the summit of this plateau here down towards the Côte de la Redoute. And I tell you what, this has been hammer on for the last 15 or 20 kilometers. Everybody trying to get a small group off the front. And right now a chance to see another rider from Team Coast who's looking to try and get himself into this small breakaway. A lot of these riders, Phil, they must have had a very difficult time getting themselves psychologically prepared to race this year, because it's been an on-off situation. The team was suspended, they were allowed to race again. There is still the dispute on riders who were in the team last year who haven't received wages, and even Jan Ullrich up until the last moment wasn't sure whether or not his license was going to get issued. But right now I think the performance of Jan Ullrich last week will give the team a lot of psychological advantages and a boost to let them realise that the main man is back on form and firing.
Well, there's no doubt when Alex Zuller left and moved across to Phonak, he left the team rock bottom morale. But they seem to have come round a big time now. They've convinced. I spoke to Sven Turtenberg about 2 weeks ago on the team coast, and he said Ulrich will be a threat in the Tour de France. He said he won't win, but he will be on the podium in Paris. So there's a man who understands his German teammate pretty well. So we'll wait and see if that's going to be the case. This is Christoph Brandt here on the left for Lotto, giving us a nice smile at the camera. I've also seen Nico Matan still there for Cofidis, and always a good outside chance of a win. Very aggressive bike rider, but this is life at the rear of the peloton just now, and it must be pretty drafty back there. Oscar Frere, twice the world champion, working hard at the other end, and with him too Javier Pascal Rodriguez for Ibernesto. Nice to see the Spanish riders these last couple of weeks are really getting to grips now with these one-day classic races, winning Flèche-Wallonne and taking second for the first time the other day.
Well, these attacks certainly are stretching out the main field all of the time, and there's going to be some very tired bodies when we get to the bottom of the Côte de la Redoute. Nice to see the sun coming out as well, but it is going through this part of Belgium very tricky on some of these descents, Phil. You can see the road conditions. That slight dampness on the surface makes it very risky when you plunge down some of these descents, and nobody quite certain or not whether they've broken the stranglehold on the main field. They keep looking over their shoulders to see what sort of a gap they have over the main field. Alessio moving a man into the break. This is Laurent Dufaux who's got across there for Alessio. No stranger to Liège-Bastogne-Liège.
That breakaway is establishing 3, 6, 9, 10. That's shortly to be 11. Now, just below us there, that's the peloton. No, yes, I think it is. More or less regrouping here. The chase back as they all come back together again. Sitting there on the front, 201, that's Tyler Hamilton, CSC. So he's seen his CSC teammates out in the early moves, now looking to take part in a few himself. Jan Ullrich, nearest camera, there he is. Probably the best shot we've had of him for about 2 years, Paul.
It certainly is, and he really is being very attentive here, Phil, in this bike race. Which an on-form Jan Ullrich could very easily win, and I'm surprised to see him riding so well after such a short comeback. But I think he's obviously had a very serious winter, mentored by Rudy Pevenage, no stranger to Liège-Bastogne-Liège. In fact, Rudy Pevenage rode that Liège-Bastogne-Liège when only about 13 riders finished, and Bernard Hinault was the winner. All the number ones in the race are coming to the front now. There's Vinokourov, 31 for Team Telecom. He's the leader of that squad. Axel Merckx again trying to put a bit of pressure on. He's an unbelievable bike rider, Axel. He's got no fear at all of trying to go out on the attack.
Well, he's looking extremely strong yet again. Dad will be proud of him. Dad's doing the commentary on Belgian TV. Gerrit Glomser has been up in the action today for quite a long way. And moving up there, Christian Mareni, and also another rider who's on form in the Alessio squad. But I saw Mirko Celestino also second in Milan-San Remo, riding very close to the front. It looks as though Seiko have got such a strong team today. They're not making many mistakes yet. And we haven't seen Danilo De Luca. If you catch him, he'll wear number 13.
Well, one man who seems to be missing out a little bit in all of this action is Lance Armstrong, who we haven't seen at the front end of the main field for a short while. And I think the big problem with Armstrong is he doesn't have all his teammates around him right now. He's been isolated, I think, by the fact that this race has been very difficult since we left Bastogne.
Little 3-up group getting clear then, led by the aggressive Axel Merckx. Sitting at the back here is now Glomser, who's been marshalling every break that he could get himself into, not contributing a lot to it, but keeping an eye on it. I don't think he's meant to be the man to start today somehow for the team, but that's Mareni, who is now in the middle. But Merckx firing well and driving on. Now that Lotto have got some good riders in this race today. They've got 3 official leaders. One is Axel, the other one is Rick Verbrugge, and of course their team leader in the World Cup, Peter van Petegem.
Axel is a huge bike rider, and look at the amount of seat bin he's got out there.
Yeah,
and,
it's
he's
like
had
an extra seat tube, isn't it, really? Yeah.
He's had an awful lot of discussions with his dad, and in fact his dad very much against the movement away from steel a couple of years ago, and I think it was only because Axel started racing that Eddie decided to move across and start making titanium frames and then carbon fiber. And since then, I think he's changed his views on the things that bikes should actually be made out of.
Good charge there by Vicioso. He's also had a couple of wins this year from ex-Kelme rider. And this again is a superb effort by these riders. The Gerolsteiner rider here is Weckmann, Fabian Weckmann from Germany. He's also coming across the gap. It's going to give us 5 hard workers.
Well, this is a tough bike race, and I tell you what, there's going to be some. This is another serious counter-attack coming off the front here. Merckx, Astroloa, Glosmer, Moreni and Wegman. Astroloa film, I don't really know where he came from, but they must have just charged across the gap.
Well, there are 2 Seiko down there, so he obviously made the gap, but I never saw him come. Maybe you all did. There we are. We've got 5, 6 riders now going clear with Astroloa, who is so full of confidence, as is the whole of Seiko. They'll drive on now because, remember, the breakaway with Astroloa in succeeded in Flèche-Wallonne. They were away for a long way, and the peloton never saw them again. Now, you caught a glimpse there of the Côte de la Redoute. That is the next climb on the horizon when we get there, and it stands out like a sore thumb on the Belgian countryside. It's a brute.
It's a brute, and it will be lined from top to bottom by huge Belgian crowds. Looking back down, you can see the riders flipping across the road here.
I'm going to give this Iban Mayo here, coming across the gap. He's also on excellent form, and he's passed by our TV camera, so he'll join the leaders, and that will give us now 7 riders. This is how breakaways form. They've had a lot of attacks, and they've marshalled all the names. Now, 1 or 2 names have got into this move. Now, if it was Mayo, he hasn't come into the bottom of our picture yet.
Well, he hasn't made the junction for the moment. Those 6 riders at the front are working exceptionally well together, and the fact that Seiko have got 2 riders in the group means that they will put a lot more pressure into the success of this breakaway, and it is a huge advantage to go to the bottom of La Redoute in a small breakaway like this. You don't have to battle at the front end of the main field. If you're in the main field, it ends up being like the charge to the line in the final kilometre of a bunch sprint, because you know you have to get around the corner at the bottom of La Redoute in the first 5 or 6 places, because the road narrows almost immediately as soon as you start to kick up.
This is Beckman, number 97. Who had a good chase to scurry onto the back, and he's still recovering from that chase, I think. The Seiko riders are hammering home the advantage here, and just look at these boys put the pressure on. Everybody else, you'd think the sprint was down the road here, Paul, are just trying to break this group up.
Well, you can see Glomser's got the word there from Astroloa. He's putting up the hammer down as much as he can. They're on the slight decline now as we go down towards the Côte de la Redoute, and they will try and make sure they can keep hold of this advantage, because it is a huge advantage to start the climb, even with 20 or 30. Oh, Glomser nearly took out his teammate there. I think he just caught the edge of the road there and bumped into the shoulder of Astroloa, and that was almost a complete wipeout for Seiko, and that really would have been not very good for the books.
It would have been embarrassing, let's face it. And now Glomser coming through on his teammate Astroloa again, followed by Axel Merckx. Never afraid of a work rate, Axel, as he now continues to push on, knowing his wife is watching him on television. Always a good inspiration. Fabian Wegman also across the gap. Little bit of messing around going on here just now. Vicioso having to close down. They're driving on at the front. There must be a lot of concern. And as Paul has said, we haven't caught a glimpse of Lance Armstrong since the last climb. So maybe he's taking a breather, knowing that La Redoute could indeed this year be the springboard for the riders in this group.
Well, that's Guerini on the front, and this is a huge acceleration from Nico Matin coming right now, charging down. They want to bring it all back together. It's about 24 seconds from the leading group of 6 to the main field, and it really is not a very big main field right now either. In that group are all of the big names. Men like Armstrong are still in the group. Jan Ullrich is still in this group as well. And they do realise that this is a very critical point in the bike race, because we're charging down right now, Phil, towards the start of the Côte de la Redoute. Nico Matin has opened up a pretty serious gap over the main field, but he has a 6-man breakaway just in front of him.
Win of the prologue time trial in Paris-Nice, and a great 5th place for him in the Tour of Flanders, which is always a wonderful result if you're a Belgian. But right now, the field gathering strength behind and allowing him to run just a little bit. I think they'll come back for him. He's got to cross the gap. Up the road is that group of 6 riders. Here they are, and still ploughing on. And right on the front there, the 2 Seiko riders drive on. Merckx for the moment sitting at the back, but it's only while he waits to go through.
They're charging now down towards Remouchon, which is where the Côte de la Redoute starts, and these riders are all taking advantage of this small group they've got, because if they can just get to Remouchon with 20 or 30 seconds lead over the main field, they don't have to go through the battle to get to the foot of the Côte de la Redoute. Merckx very keen to keep the tempo nice and high, but this for the moment is a group that's starting to look rather dangerous, because there's some pretty serious names in here, and the man seriously on form is Astroloa after his win in the Flèche Wallonne. There he is, wearing number 11. Always regarded himself as a one-day classics rider, and getting the win that was, I think, the first time Spain ever has won that race, Phil.
Yep, and they coupled it up with a nice second place. Well, sorry about a bit of picture break up there. That's a little bit of a naughty signal coming out of the trees. But there's the breakaway, and a chance now for a relationship with the main field. They are obviously making a reasonable progress. This is our way down the valley, and there's only one way out of it as far as this race is concerned. And you see the autoroute crossing there. Well, we go right up alongside that over to the right once we get around the back of Remouchon. This is Vicioso. He was the man that was once disqualified after a stage win in the Tour of Spain. Was it Spain or Italy?
He got the win, actually.
He got the win, but he got disqualified.
No, he got the win in
oh, he got the
Giro
win as a
d'Italia.
result of,
yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
It was Biagio Conti who was disqualified after switching everybody all the way across the road.
So there's the gaps, 25 seconds and 37 seconds to the main field. So it's still not right. I think he was the one disqualified, wasn't he, Paul?
I think he was, actually. I think there was a bit of confusion. In fact, if I remember correctly now, he took everybody across the road. It wasn't really that vicious a sprint, and then the judges decided to take him away from first position, and he was not very happy about that, was he?
No, in fact, the riders weren't either. There was a little bit of a strike next morning. Conti was given the result, but they all felt that the judges have been a bit harsh, but that's a long time ago now. These are the breakaways. This is the town of Remouchon, and we'll be making our way now back into the climbs. There'll be a little turn through the town, up under the bridge, and then we start the climb. Nice little hostelry here, and again another excellent base if ever you want to come into this region of Belgium to ride in the Ardennes.
Well, these guys now have got a very serious advantage, I would say. This is the race situation right now. It's 26 seconds back to Nico Martin and 38 seconds back to the main field. But they have the advantage, Phil, of starting the climb without having to battle for position. And that is a serious advantage, because once they turn right here, they'll pick their way through a few little back streets of the town of Remouchon, and then the climb will start in earnest. And as soon as they get out of town, the road steepens up to about 23% in certain points. But the difficulty with this climb is it is so narrow, made a lot narrower by the fact that a huge crowd turns out to see this point in the race here, which everyone regards as being very strategic.
Well, there could be gears as low as a 25 on the back for this climb now, because it gets very steep, 25% in places, and the 6 riders who are hitting the town first are Axel Merckx, Gerrit Glomser, Christian Moreni, Angel Vicioso, Fabian Weckmann and Igor Astroloa. And this is the new Once man on the block, Vicioso on the back. He was with Kelme. There it says 1 in 5 is the steepest point, 19%. Up near the top where it really kicks in. Great view, by the way, once you're up there.
I think Glomser here on the front has obviously decided to do as much as he can to keep their advantage to the foot of the steep part of the Côte de la Redoute, because there you can see in 5th position Astroloa quite happy just to let his teammate do all of the pacemaking, just nicking round here the Gerolsteiner rider, who was actually looking rather good just a few moments ago, Fabian Weckmann. But in fact, look at this, Glomser now just disappearing from the front. He's done his job for his teammate. We're coming to the steeper part of the climb here right now, and that, by the way, is an autoroute, which you're not...
It is amazing, and obviously the police have now agreed, after being forced into a decision over the years, that they can now angle park the cars on the autoroute.
They'd have to give out an awful lot of tickets today, that's for sure. Very difficult to stop the Belgians seeing a bike race, because they really do enjoy getting out to see the event. And well, the laws have to be bent slightly, I think, in Belgium when it comes down to bike racing.
Yeah, it looks as though they've closed the motorway just because there was no cars moving there. While the race gets through, this is Nico Matan. I think he's still chasing on his own here, trying to reach the leaders. It looked as though the youngster, Fabien Weckmann, Gerolsteiner, is going to be the first victim of the breakaway on the climb. There's the autoroute, complete car park, obviously allowed this time by the Belgian authorities. And Weckmann just has hooked himself back up to the tail here of Vicioso.
Well, Glom's had disappeared from the mix
huge
here
effort
right now. He
him,
did a huge effort at the bottom of the climb and decided to put the white flag up in surrender. So chasing out on the road at 43 seconds is the group, and I think that will start to be reduced somewhat. Look at the Merckx effort here, though. He really is getting out of the saddle and trying to make sure that he takes advantage of what is a seriously good move here for these riders. Nico Matan only has about 10 seconds over the main field, but this is a great move by Axel. He's very comfortable here on the early slopes of the Côte de la Redoute, but it does get steeper as you get up towards the summit.
It certainly does, although they may not see the gradient too quickly because of the crowds. But Merckx on the front. They've lost Gerrit Glomse. His job quite clearly was to try and get this group clear and keep it clear for Asteloa. He's the man on form, and he's done that part of his job very well indeed. Now he's got to hang on and just ride home. But Asteloa in a perfect position here now. Well, it would be a wonderful thing if it could be the double for Asteloa with the flesh full on and the Liege, Bastogne, Liege. Matan wisely going back into the field here. This is the start of the climb, really. This is a toughie.
A very difficult climb. You can see everybody now realizing that they want to move to the frontier. There is Danilo De Luca in the first 4 or 5 places. Armstrong in 8th place. Riding to the front there, you can see Jan Ullrich. In fact, Ullrich and Armstrong very close together. Merckx deciding he wants to set the pace all of the way up this climb right now, and this is probably the best thing to do because you can set the pace which is comfortable for yourself. Second position there, Asteloa. 3rd place, Vicioso. At the back there, Weckmann, the Gerolsteiner rider, Phil, seems to be in a bit of difficulty.
Yes, I'm not surprised because he's probably the one with the least experience in this breakaway. Merckx knows exactly what he wants to do here. Now, these last couple of years, this hasn't served as the decisive springboard, and Merckx is thinning the group out a little bit. It's Merckx, Asteloa, Vicioso. Moreni just about tagged on. Weckmann struggling but holding them in sight and not prepared to give up without a fight, so good for him. Very international breakaway this, a Belgian, Swiss, Italian, 2 Spaniards and a German, although we've lost the Swiss rider now. This is back in the main field.
Tyler Hamilton very close to the front there, right position in the middle, so he's doing well.
Matan.
Now I have a feeling Matan, we will find him at the back of the bike race right now. In fact, with the yellow car being there, I think his effort was just to get himself on TV for a short while because he went straight through the main field and out the back.
Well, it's a shame, but we can't really show the gradients of this climb on television. It's like when you watch Formula 1 motor racing, you don't realise how fast those cars are going. This is a very, very steep climb. I never cease to be amazed by the way these riders seem to flatten out the countryside. Let's look at Merckx here. He's got his gears right down, but he's got himself a very fast pedaling cadence, and I think they've cracked Weckmann here, who's just trying to hang on in the distance.
Well, Axel is really on fine form here this afternoon because he's setting a very tough tempo there on the front end, and these riders will conserve most of their advantage over the summit of this climb. 46 seconds. Armstrong moving to the front of the group here, Phil. He's looking very comfortable, very nicely situated in 2nd position there as they start the serious part of the Côte de la Redoute.
Well, the Seiko rider there trying just to keep them all back off this group because Asteloa going up towards the summit in 1st place has tremendous form. Here comes a move by Tyler Hamilton. Now, where is Lance? He won't like this with another American dictating affairs, and so he's going to have to try and close it down. Huge effort here by Tyler Hamilton, who has great form. He had a wonderful race in Spain just a couple of weeks ago.
Counter-attack now coming from Bogart there in the red and the orange and blue strip of Rabobank. He now wants to try and open up the gap. Armstrong is very comfortably there though, Phil, still in 4th position at the front end of the main field and responding to all of these attacks. And you can see looking further down the main field, this image here gives you a chance to see just how difficult it is. And here is Vinokourov, I think, in a bit of a problem at the back.
Well, Michael Bogart, he's had a runner-up slot in Liège over the years, also finished 5th. Now, this is the big effort now, as you're watching here, the carnage at the back of the race as the steepness of this gradient. This is the steepest climb on the race route. It's not the longest, but it's long enough as we gradually haul our way to the summit. That's the line down on the left of our picture. Then they'll turn right as they come over the top and make their way back around towards Sprimont, and the next climb there, which is the Côte de Sprimont.
Well, they're going over now the summit of the Côte de la Redoute, and I have to say that their advantage has been dramatically reduced there by that acceleration. It was Moreni who was on the front end there, and in fact Wegman done a very good job there, Phil, to recover and pull himself back up to this leading group of 5 riders. Astroloa, Merckx, Moreni, Vicioso and Wegman now leading by, I would say, next time we get a time check, not very much more than 25 seconds. Turning over the summit here of the Côte de la Redoute, a small road now taking him towards the outskirts of the town of Sprimont. The Côte de Sprimont is not really a very difficult climb, but just enough to hurt the legs as we go back to the main field, and Armstrong accelerating now.
Now Armstrong has done well there, positioned himself well on the climb, because the right-hander, it's very narrow around here, and our motorbike is giving you the best shots. Right in amongst it, there's Hamilton gritting his teeth, grabbing the wheel in front. Now these riders, it's normally now when the effort, there's Bogart going through.
Well, it's an unbelievable turn of speed by Armstrong. There's Francesco Casagrande going through.
Echevarria, look at the face on these boys now. This is a big effort now. There's the split, look at this.
And Rebellin is there as well. So the big names are still in here with a chance for the moment, but that was an incredible turn of speed by Armstrong. I think really just testing the waters for the moment, Phil, because they're just getting onto the back here, Laurent Dufaux. I think if Armstrong wants to win this bike race, he needs to make in a huge effort on the Côte de Saint-Nicolas towards the end. Looking down here, the colours of these trees are almost like the autumn colours, and we're actually in the early spring here in Europe. But what a great turn of speed coming from Lance Armstrong there just a few moments ago. So the leading group of 5 do not have very much more than a 25-second advantage, I would say. And one man who we've not seen an awful lot of is the man whose name is emblazoned on the road here right now, VDB, Frank van den Broeke. Hamilton moving further forward, Francesco Casagrande, and there on the front of the group there is the US Postal Service rider Lance Armstrong. No teammates at all in this group to help him out, and I think the reason he accelerated there was to try and reduce the numbers of the other men at the front end of the peloton. Looking very calm and concentrated right now. Come on, somebody else do some work at the front end of this group. Bogart is here, man who finished second just a week ago in the Amstel Gold Race, and watch out for the counterattacks. The Spaniards always waiting for a moment to get out on the attack and try and open up the pace. Hamilton responding. The Hamilton actually in very good form here in the early part of this season, after a very good start in Paris-Nice, where he in fact took the King of the Mountains competition. And the leading group of 5 now about to turn onto the main road just in the outskirts of Primont. Merckx first round the corner, followed by Astroloa. Tête de la course, the front end of the bike race. That's Kristin Moore, followed by Wegman and Vicioso. We've now covered about 225 kilometers of this bike race, so about 25 kilometers to go to the finish. The 5 leaders are around about 1.8 kilometers to the summit of the Côte de Sprimont, and the Côte de Sprimont, Phil, is not really a tough climb. In fact, it kind of undulates on a plateau here before we drop down to the next 2 difficult climbs. The ones that I think are the most decisive ones, the Côte de Saint-Tilmont and of course the Côte de Saint-Nicolas.
And that's the one. That's where you scurry for the line, and I suppose it might favour the lithe, little lightweight climbers if they've survived to that sort of pressure. That looks like Mayo again on the attack, who's trying once more to bridge the gap. The only man we've lost from that breakaway is Gerrit Glomser, who really gave it 110% to open the gap and give the advantage to Astroloa.
Well, a small group actually splintering off the front end of the main field right now. Tyler Hamilton getting himself with that group. There's a group at 20 seconds and the main field at 48 seconds. I think the group at 20 seconds is the group containing Lance Armstrong, and they're only about 20 or 30 meters behind this counter-attack of 5.
There's the view of Sprimont. Very fast section of the course.
Well, that's the front end of the bike race there with the yellow car, the neutral service vehicle. And not too far behind, we should get a chance to see that counterattack with Iban Mayo and Tyler Hamilton. But not too far behind there is the group also containing Lance Armstrong, Bogart, Danilo De Luca, Francesco Casagrande. Still feel all of the big names are in with a chance here at Liège-Bastogne-Liège.
They are, but they'll be getting increasingly concerned by the fact that Asteloa, the winner of Flèche Wallonne, is now putting himself in a breakaway of this importance. Now, the last man to do the double, by the way, was Moreno Argentin back in 1991. And that would be an incredible performance, especially by a rider coming from Spain, to win the Ardennais weekend. There they are, 4 or 5 of them, just to give you the names again: Axel Merckx, Christian Moreni, Angel Vicioso, Fabian Wegman and Igor Asteloa. Here they are, close up, and that's Wegman, suffering but hanging on and staying with them at the moment.
Suffering but still there. A kilometre now to the summit of the Côte de Sprimont, which is just a small little excursion of the main road, which is normally in the old days was the main road down towards Liège. They zigzag now into Liège to make the race just a little bit more difficult, as if it wasn't hard enough already. Wegman always put into difficulty, but you see he's riding pretty sensibly here, because he's allowing himself to ride at his own tempo, and when he can, he just accelerates just to sprint onto the back end of the group. Every time that they come to these slight climbs, he is losing 10 or 15 meters. I tell you who is on fine form today, though, is Axel Merckx. This is the next group on the road. Hamilton's group now has been caught by Lance Armstrong. Armstrong is now becoming a lot more attentive, Phil.
He's beginning to look like a man that could possibly win this race right now. There is Lance. Things working out very, very well. And right with him now is Tyler Hamilton. 2 Americans dictating affairs here, concentrating and looking very, very strong. Now let's have a look down that line. This is quite a nice little group that they're getting going, and the team cars are in between. Our motorbike is also in the way, I think, and I got a feeling there Lance told our motorbike which way to turn.
Yes, I think he was asking him to ride on the left-hand side of the road, please.
Yeah, that was the word, yeah.
Something like that. Anyway, this leading group is now down to just 4 riders. Wegman has disappeared this time, Phil. Axel Merckx did a very long turn on the front, and I think they're in fact about ready to pull out that neutral service vehicle. So it looks as if it may well all come back together before the start of the Côte de Sartillemont. And that, in fact, there you can see pulling out the neutral service vehicle. That is also always a psychological blow to a group like this, because they know that the main field is starting to come back. Moreni, former wearer of the pink jersey in the Giro d'Italia, 20 seconds back to the group containing Armstrong, but then the remnants of the main field just at 48 seconds. So this race is still very much not a done affair.
Well, hats off to Axel Merckx. He's ridden a superb race today. Those long gangly legs of his have been pumping well, and he attacked and attacked and attacked before he finally got this group clear as they raced into Remechon, and they consolidated on the climb of La Redoute. It's far from certain they're going to survive to the finish, but he's really taken the race to the rest of them today.
Michele Bartoli, he also is looking fairly aggressive right now. He's won this bike race twice in the past. Armstrong is in 4th position, and I think starting to look like a pretty serious contender here right now. And the reason Armstrong attacked at the top of the Côte de la Redoute, here's a move by Merckx, who wants to go on his own right now.
Well, this is amazing. Merckx has moved across. Moreni swung off his wheel, and Merckx is now going for gold. Settling down into his tartar position, a little look over his shoulder to say, hey, what happened, guys? But he's going clear. He has had a 5th in this race back in the year 2000. That's his best ever finish. It is a course for him, but I think he does need to come home alone.
Well, in fact, he finished 7th as well in 1996 when Armstrong finished 2nd, but this is a great move, and getting a little bit close there to the motorbike, but it's the advantage to the attacker right now. And looking at the speed here, I would say Axel is touching 60-65 kilometers an hour and looking very good indeed.
Shades of his dad here, Eddie Merckx, who's the record holder in this race, and he'll be absolutely pleased as punch to see his son doing this, because he loves an aggressive bike rider, and who certainly Axel Merckx today has been all of that. He's being chased by the cream of the race as well. Let's not forget that. There they are down there, Armstrong, Hamilton, Bartoli, and there's a very agitated commissaire trying to move everybody out of the way because it's all beginning to reform. and the pressure is really on. I think the peloton, Paul, might well be out of the hunt now.
Well, I tell you what, that was a very good move by Axel, but the problem is the chasing group now containing Armstrong, Bartoli, all of the big names is really not very far behind at all. So Axel probably only has about 10 seconds advantage, but if they do start to watch each other, then he can build up a lead, because very shortly he's going to take a left-hand turn and take in a long descent down towards the start of the next climb of the day, the Côte de Sartillemont. And if they can only start to mark each other in that group behind, then he can start to build on his advantage. But there's an awful lot of big names in this group.
Well, it's not for the lack of trying that Axel Merckx has never won a bike race for 2 years, because this man is always in the hunt for the prizes, just doesn't seem to get it working out his way. Now let's hope he can dangle a bit longer off the front. We can have a look where he is now as we shoot off at the road. About 15-20 seconds. Let's give him 20 seconds at the moment.
That's a good move, and all he needs really is for those guys in the back to start manoeuvring around and looking for tactical situations. I don't think they're going to, because they dare not, with the main field being only around 30 seconds behind them. He looks very strong here right now. He's got a great position on the bike, considering how tall a bike rider he is. Iban Mayo here trying to accelerate on the front end of the main field. They're all over the road right now. They've got the yellow neutral service vehicle in there. 1 or 2 team cars have got across the gap as well, so obviously the gap back to the main field must be hovering around the 30-second mark still, as we rejoin Axel at the front. What you were saying a few moments ago, Phil, about Axel, yes, he doesn't win very many bike races, but when he does, they're usually pretty good ones, and those bands on his jersey there indicate that one of those wins was the Belgian National Championships. He's won a stage in the Giro as well. He's always a rider who has to win a bike race on his own if he can, because he doesn't really have a great turn of speed when it comes down to a sprint towards the end.
Well, he's working at it now. He's around about in miles, about 15, that's all from the finish. About 40 minutes of racing left to go for him, and the gap 15 seconds. I can't see him holding off the group, but you never know, because this group contains a number of the race favourites, and once you've got a number of race favourites, things can happen. And that's exactly what's happening now, because they're not getting the results here that they really want. Is this Fabian Weckmann going again?
It looks as if it may well be. There was a first move came from Michele Bartoli. Looking a bit further down the road there is Merckx. We're going through the town of Dolenbreux, and he will in a few moments time come up against a very sharp descent, and just a bit of respite for a kilometre or so before he starts the Côte de Sartillemont. But what he has to do now is to get into a very fine effort, an effort which he has to hope he can endure for the next 25 kilometres and 3 very difficult climbs, because one climb is not in fact indicated as a climb on the course, but the climb up to the finishing straight, the climb in the outskirts of Ans, is also rather a difficult climb, especially after 258 kilometres in the saddle.
And if you're making all the effort yourself, there's the 25 kilometres to go board. Change of direction. This is our new approach into Liege these days now, and Merckx is going like a train, concentrating hard. There's a lot of reaction here. I somehow don't feel that the peloton can get themselves back into this race. Not why these riders are riding like this, but this group surely are going to pin back Axel Merckx at some stage. Now, is this Oscar Masson or Mazzolini? We one or the other as they come around that right-hander.
It's a pretty strange race right now. These guys, there are so many big names in that group. They all are trying to rip off the front on their own, and nobody wants to organise themselves. And that's the good thing for Axel right now, because nobody wants to control the races. Hardly anybody in that group has got a teammate to sacrifice in the chase down of a lone leader. And in fact, I think Axel Merckx may well have just stretched out his advantage by a few seconds.
Yes, you could have added a 5 seconds gap. Here we are. That's our camera alongside him. Here's the images from it. And Axel now riding on. Obviously felt good today, right from the start, when he inquired about what time French television were taking pictures so he could tell his wife. I think that's a sign of a man who intended to be in front of the camera lenses towards the end. And that's exactly what's happening here. 16 seconds is the gap. A little bit of a difficulty with that big body of his and the centre of gravity getting round the corners, but he's still upright.
Well, in fact, you see how he got his knee out a long way there. That's very typical of the kind of descending Sean Yates used to do. And Axel, despite the fact that he's a very large bike rider, is very well proportioned on the machine. And he, in fact, goes downhill pretty rapidly. right now all he's got to do is just ride his own pace and just hope that they start to mess around in the group behind, which they seem to be doing right now. There's Kristin Moore. He was in the counter-attack with Merckx just a few moments ago. Iban Mayo looking down the group. They're all in here still. Michele Bartoli just moving on to the back of the group there as well. In fact, it was on the Côte de Sartillemont a couple of years ago that he laid the foundations for one of his 2 victories here in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. There's an idea of the speed that we're facing at the moment, 65 kilometers an hour.
And we're running down towards the last 20 kilometers to go, because these last 5 kilometers have been largely downhill. I'm saying 24, but that's for this group because it's a while since we went past that 25 barrier now. 18 seconds the gap. Not a lot, but a chance, just a chance. And these are perfect roads for a lone escape.
The problem is, once he gets to the bottom of this descent, he's got a kilometer or so. This is Michele Bartoli. He's taking advantage of the motorbike there to try and pick up the pace, and in fact he's got himself an advantage over the chasing group. He's been joined by Kristin Moore. The Italians now are deciding to try and nail back Lance Armstrong a little further back. Somebody else trying to claw themselves across this gap.
Well, he's been in the doldrums for a while, Michele, but it looks as though he might well be coming out of it. A little bit of annoyance expressed again at the camera crew there as they try to take the line on the way down this hill. Morini, I can't believe, has got the legs to stay with him for that long now, having been in that earlier breakaway, but he'll give him a hand if he can. Meanwhile, down below somewhere is Liège-Bastogne-Liège as we search amongst the trees. But there was a Seiko rider crossing the gap there now. The one Seiko rider we haven't seen, Paul, is De Luca, and I don't know where he is.
I have no idea where he is. I would expect him to be in that group because he's in fine form right now. We're rejoining Axel Merckx, taking an unbelievable turn around that corner there, not losing any of his momentum at all, keeping the pace high, 60 kilometers an hour. A quick charge through town here, and then he will start the next climb of the day, the Côte de Sartillemont, which comes at 244 kilometers. It's not a very steep or long climb, but after this long effort by Merckx, it really is going to hurt.
Well, this is the lovely little town of Tilf, where the randonnée, the tourist trial, Tilf-Bastogne-Tilf, largely follows the same route as Liège-Bastogne-Liège, but it's just down the road from Liège for the tourist routier riders. And now, again, the in battle is continuing. There's Asteloa off to the right. I don't see any signs at all of De Luca. So this is interesting now. It looks like Asteloa is going to have to do something about it.
Tyler Hamilton in this group as well, and one man who seems to have got caught out in all this tactical manoeuvring is Lance Armstrong, who is obviously in the group just a little bit further back. This is turning out to be rather a strange tactical race here right now. The gap is 18 seconds to Merckx, and here is Armstrong himself.
We're stuck on 18 seconds. Not a lot, but they're not gaining anything. Iban Mayo coming through this year, I think, about to deliver all the promise that everybody says this young rider has had over the years. Mayo has been very aggressive today, and he's got himself into the move now. So the Spanish riders are penetrating the European early classics now for the first time probably ever. And this is the oldest classic of all, let's not forget that. And a Spanish cyclist like him, Fleshwell, has never won this race either.
Armstrong is looking very keen right now. There's 20 kilometers to go. That's going to take these riders around about half an hour on a route like this, because we've still got 3 very difficult climbs. Axel Merckx for the moment is managing to survive by around about 18 seconds, but I have a feeling, Phil, once we start the ascent of the Côte de Sartillemont, those 18 seconds are going to get wiped away pretty rapidly, because the guys in that group behind, Armstrong, Asteloa, Michele Bartoli, Tyler Hamilton, they are big names, and they have not had to put in the kind of effort that Axel has had to put in since the summit of the Côte de la Redoute.
Well, you're right, they are big names, and this is Samuel Sanchez just in front now, also giving them a handout here. They are big names, and they've got to wait now, I think, for the climb to try and break the breakaway. In fact, that wasn't Mayo that was up here, it was his teammate Sanchez who's joined this chase group. And very nice workman group with Tyler Hamilton in here, and also, of course, Lance Armstrong. This is a good group now as we head up towards the penultimate climb of the day.
Alexander Scheffer has got himself into this group. This is the face of Armstrong on the big days, isn't it, Phil? Completely concentrated just looking around at the other riders in the group, expecting them to come through and do their share of the pacemaking. And I think psychologically they will be waiting for Armstrong to hit them with a very hard attack. And I wonder where it will come, if it's going to be on the next climb of the day or whether he will wait until the final climb, the Côte de Saint-Nicolas. Still holding on to an advantage though, Axel Merckx, the former champion of Belgium. And I wonder what his dad's thinking right now. His dad though is a realist, and he realizes that a man like Lance Armstrong wants to win this bike race. And in fact, before the start of the day, his father, Eddie Merckx, admitted that the #1 favorite for this bike race today was going to be Lance Armstrong.
Yes, and Merckx having to ride a difficult race here. 740 meters to the climb of the Sartillemont. And the gap has come down to around about 12 seconds, they say, but it looks a little bit further than that, I think. There's the group of 5, a very select group of Armstrong, Hamilton, Bartoli, Sanchez and Alexander Scheffer. Seiko trying desperately to keep their run of fortune in the classics, but they keep changing the men in the breakaways, and gone now for the moment at least is Astor.
Did you see how quickly Michele Bartoli got onto the wheel of Lance Armstrong there, Phil? As soon as there was an acceleration from the American, whoosh, and he was straight across. And that's where he gets his nickname from, Il Gatto, the cat. He is so used to pouncing across a move like that. Getting themselves sorted out. They're just crossing the river right now, and very shortly they will begin the climb. To start off, it's not that difficult, but then it really does start to turn left and right. Axel Merckx himself is already on the early slopes of the climb, and he certainly has not lost any of his impetus at all. It's a 3.6 kilometer climb. It's 9% at the steepest part, but only 3.5% the average grade.
Now you can hear the crowd just shouting for Axel Merckx here as he starts this climb now. It's going to be crucial, this one, because surely this is going to be the next piece of decision in this race. Armstrong and Bartoli are going to mark each other now, and Hamilton is going to try and profit from the infight. And the other two, well, they're just going to take a back seat and watch what goes on here. Lance is now stamping on these pedals on the climb. Well, 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 the peloton is still there, Paul, and it's quite large, and it's not that far behind.
It certainly isn't that far behind right now. There is the group of Armstrong and Michele Bartoli, and I would expect to see an acceleration coming from the main field in a few moments' time. Bartoli swinging off, and I think the reason they're messing around here right now is to set themselves up for some kind of a counter-attack coming shortly.
Nice little tempo rider, but we're looking now at Axel Merckx as he continues the climb. Dare not look over his shoulder. They haven't given up by any manner of means. There he is, the tempo of a man we so often see in the Tour de France doing a similar style of riding. Bartoli looking like he is finally finding his old self again, looking very, very smooth at the front. The peloton and those cars will have to keep looking over the shoulders because it is there. You can see them in the distance. They are coming up very, very quickly. Merckx looks to me, Paul, as though he might be slowing down.
He's slowing down a bit, and probably because he's looked over his shoulder and realized that the express train is coming right now. The big advantage here for him is to try and sit up, recuperate a certain amount, and then try and get onto the train behind. Strange to see CSC on the front end of the main field chasing down their man Tyler Hamilton, who is in a race-winning situation for the moment.
Well, I'm not too sure what they're doing here. Perhaps they don't realize that that Hamilton is in that group, because that doesn't make sense. Here's Armstrong. Continued, in fact, doing most of the work on this climb to great effect as well. He's hauling back in Axel Merckx. Now Michele Bartoli could profit from this, because he might well try to jump away. He can't go up to the finish line, I don't think, today with Armstrong. He looks very strong.
I think Armstrong, this is a move coming, an acceleration coming from Armstrong right now. I'm not sure whether he's trying, well, in fact, he's got rid of everybody else. Only Michele Bartoli has stayed with him, and that really goes to show how good Armstrong is this afternoon. I wonder if he'll look across at Axel and shout a word of encouragement. No, thank you, goodbye, I'm off. This is pretty impressive. There's a move there. Alexander Scheffer has recovered. He has come back up. Also coming forward there as well, Sanchez has come across.
Well, that will give us 4.
And Merckx has gone off the back.
He'll recover, I think, on this occasion at least. They've hit him at the hardest time of the climb. but he's not far from the top if he can just hang on. But you know, he'll have a decision to make now, because the peloton are also hovering not too far off the pace. Still a lot of riders in this race with a real chance. There's Axel Merckx, still looking full of fight. Will be a little bit angry that Armstrong has brought up that little group at the most difficult part of the climb. Here is the race from behind, still CSC riding hard. Now, I haven't seen the whereabouts of Tyler Hamilton, but as far as I know, he's just in front of that bunch. And so I don't know why CSC are doing that. But this now is Lance Armstrong. His final test as he brings the classic season to a close. And then he'll start his final preparation for the Tour de France. Bartley having to fight.
That hurts.
Having to fight. He just hung on there. But look at this, Armstrong looking for no help now. In fact, Bartley can't hold it. He's had to sit up and he's willing to drop off for the moment.
Oh, that hurt so much for Bartley. He knew he had to stay on the wheel of Armstrong. Armstrong is not attacking here right now. He's trying to blow everybody off his wheel. He has cracked Michele Bartley, who, let's not forget, at the start of the season fractured his hip in a training accident. But Armstrong right now is still got 3 riders with him. This is Sanchez deciding that he too is going to accelerate, keep them off the front of the main field. They cannot mess around too much, Phil, because the main field is not much more than 30 seconds in arrears. And I think the reason that CSC have come forward is because Tyler Hamilton has disappeared from the group.
We didn't see him caught, but I'm pretty sure now that he was swept up pretty soon after this climb started. Now, Michele Bartley made one effort there to hold Armstrong, and his legs blew him off the mountain. Now he's having to try and recover, get himself back into line, because that was the absolute limit for him today. And Armstrong looking for no help on this climb, the Sartillemont. Sanchez riding with a little bit of a style like Armstrong himself, not just the way he's pedaling, but his situation, the way he sits on that bicycle, and looks pretty comfortable just now.
Well, there's Hamilton there in 3rd position, so he was caught up very rapidly by the main field. There is Michael Bogart on 4th position. So this race is far from over right now, Phil. There is Ivan Basso for Fassa Bortolo. He won't do very much unless he gets the information that, in fact, his teammate has cracked. There is Jan Ullrich, still looking very comfortable, and I would think will be very satisfied to be in a group like this at the end of a 258-kilometre bike race.
This is what he wanted. He said he wanted to finish in a good group near the front. He's not looking for the win today. Just as well, I think, because Lance Armstrong is showing us he's got terrific form. Sam Sanchez up alongside him, prepared now to give him a hand out as well. And so he's continuing the trend now of the men from Spain in the Ardennes Classics. That's the face of Bartley, still ahead of the main chase group. VDB rather on the road. Frank van den Broek, whatever happened to him?
Well, we've hardly seen anything of him at all. I think he was still in at the bottom of the Côte de la Redoute. Riding pretty sensibly right now is Michele Bartley. He knows that he wasn't able to match the acceleration of Armstrong, and all he will hope is that Armstrong just eases a bit by the time we get to the summit of the climb. But I have a feeling he will get caught by the main field. There's another move. That was Axel Merckx about to get caught by the main field. And so Merckx back in the fold with Christian Moreni.
They look at each other as if to say, what's going on? Where's Lance Armstrong gone? And he really has laid them flat now. It looks to me as though the final 3 for the podium are off up the road as they continue here. This is still Nicky Sorensen, who's done a lot of work today for CSC, but I'm afraid Tyler Hamilton wasn't able to deliver the goods when he got himself in a position to do just that. Samuel Sanchez, goodness knows what language he's speaking to Lance in, but it doesn't matter. Lance is saying nothing.
Well, Lance actually speaks pretty good Spanish, so I think he's able to communicate with the 2 Spaniards, and I think what he needs to do right now, well, the other rider at the back is not a Spaniard, he's a Kazakhstan, but I think he's probably telling Lance that they need to work together to get to the bottom of the next climb of the day, because they're still only 36 seconds ahead of the main field as they come here to the summit of the Côte de Sartillemont. Sitting on the back here, Alexander Scheffer, who is in absolutely superb form here at the start of this season. And after a very difficult start to the season, Seiko now starting to get themselves on a much more regular basis into the results.
Well, this will be an incredible result for Sanchez if he stays with this group right up to the finish. No wins last year. Got 14th in the Classic des Alpes, which is a good mountain event in the Alps. And he's got a little climb for the finish as well. This is over the top now of the Sartillemont. So we're now heading down towards Liege itself, and then across over to the Côte de Saint-Nicolas, and that is where it's all going to be decided. These 3 riders are clear. Now Lance is doing the lion's share of the work, so he must feel extremely good. Sanchez willing to go with him. Michele Bartoli is over the top. Doesn't look like a man who's waiting, but he may as well, because they're right off his shoulder.
They're right behind him, not more than 10 seconds right now, so the best part of valor for him would be to sit up and wait for the main field, hope to recover a little bit on this descent. But when you pop like that, the writing is on the wall that you're probably going to pop again, especially when you come to the final climb of the day, which is a very difficult ascent to the summit of the Côte de Saint-Nicolas. I would think Armstrong a bit worried about the presence here of Samuel Sanchez, and everybody's talking back to the team managers, what do I do next? Well, I think it's obvious. Work as hard as you can to the bottom of the Côte de Saint-Nicolas and then just sort it out like real men.
And that's probably what's going to happen here. Watch out for Alexander Scheffer too. He's been around quite a long time. Been a pro since '93, so this will be his 11th season now. But in fairness, we remember him racing as an amateur too, and he's a very strong bike rider and has got better really as he's got older.
They actually were just trying to encourage him to come forward there, and he's shaking his head saying no, 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 probably because Danilo De Luca is in the group behind. He's trying to play the Seiko card right to the limit here. He's going to sit on these riders and hope that he's got enough to stay with them, because there will be a very serious attack when they come to the climb of the Côte de Saint-Nicolas. And I have a funny feeling that this man here, Samuel Sanchez, may well be able to stay in contact with Armstrong.
Armstrong's trying to ring home there, judging by the fact he's pushing his earpiece in. Well, I think we're going to see the Battle of Saint-Nicolas that'll decide this year's Liège-Bastogne-Liège. This group now freewheeling a little bit, beginning to show signs of the beaten peloton. And 1 or 2 riders still trying to sprint across the front. Moreni at the back now. He was in the early move over the La Redoute. This is Sanchez and Euskedel riding extremely well. They've done enough to impress the Tour de France for their ride in the Tour de France this year. Remember, this race organisation is also the Société de Tour de France, same organisation. Scheffer, yeah, I think you're right, Paul. He is playing the Seiko card to the limit. There's not much they can do about it. Seiko have had a man in the moves of almost every classic this year, and they've been well rewarded with 2 seconds and a win.
Dario Pieri getting second in Milan-San Remo, second in Paris-Roubaix. The rain's starting to come down, but it's not going to affect the outcome of the bike race right now. That's a pretty precarious position that Sammy Sanchez is in there right now, getting down as low as he can. And these guys feel they really need not mess about too much, because that gap has come down to 27 seconds. They really need to work together, and there are only 2 men in this leading group of 3 deciding to dedicate themselves to the success of the breakaway. It's the man in orange there, Samuel Sanchez, and of course Lance Armstrong. At the back, Scheffer is banking on the return of his man Danilo De Luca, and I think Armstrong is just trying to encourage him forward to do a slight turn of work.
Well, there's the city of Liège, and indeed Lance Armstrong has now, whether he wanted to or not, has totally committed himself here, having split that breakaway up on the climb with some solid riding. Might even be a little bit surprised that somebody like Sanchez has held him, but I think more than held him, I think Sanchez is actually feeling pretty good today. CSC now sent back to the engine room and have to drive this race forward.
Well, it's a bit surprising to see CSC, the team, doing most of this pacemaking on the front, because in fact, apart from Tyler Hamilton, I can't really see a man in the list who's got a chance of winning this bike race. I would have expected to see some work coming from the riders from Rabobank, because still in the group is Oscar Frere, who's a man who could possibly get himself over the climb. There's the football ground for the Standard de Liège, a very well-known team in Europe, and that's where Lance Armstrong, Samuel Sanchez and Alexander Scheffer are about to pass in a moment. And that would give them, I think, about 2 kilometers to the start of the very difficult final climb of the day, the Côte de Saint-Nicolas.
Which puts us inside at 10 kilometers from the finish. Sanchez here stretching out those legs. Hint of cramp, maybe. I don't think he'd advertise it though by riding at the front of the breakaway. Lance, look at him, he goes through on the inside like a rabbit, straight into the lead again. Scheffer is the passenger. I would be very careful of Alexander Scheffer. He is a man who can go on this last climb.
Well, he's a great climber, and We're now looking at 2.3 kilometers to the Côte de Saint-Nicolas. Their advantage is hovering at 25 seconds over the chasing group, and as long as those neutral service vehicles stay inside, they've got a chance of survival. Once they move out, that indicates that the main field behind is starting to pull themselves closer. Armstrong very keen, I think, Phil, right now to get to the foot of the climb. He's actually getting rather nervous by the fact that the other guys in the breakaway are not digging quite as deep into their reserves as he is. And as you say, I think he's right to pay attention to the presence here of Alexander Scheffer, who's had a pretty easy ride since the Côte de Saint-Tilmont.
He's never had a podium finish, never had a good finish in the single-day classic ever, Alexander Scheffer. He's tended to be a good stage race rider. There's a few good places in stage races over his career. But now he has a real chance at a classic finish in the oldest classic of all.
David Cañada on the front there, so obviously Frank van den Broeke must be in this group, and it is still very close together. There's 24 seconds the advantage of the three leaders over what is a fairly large group right now. Amazing, Phil, and let's not forget Jan Ullrich is in this group.
It's going to be a very interesting climb to the finish, because it is reachable, you know, if this group can hold at less than half a minute. It is reachable. We've got Frank van den Broeke, we just spotted him in the group here as the three leaders go. Now Van den Broeke, if he gets to the climb, might well be where he makes his final move, because he is a man, he's the last Belgian rider, by the way, to have won this race. He did it back in his great year, 1999.
Nervous moments right now. They're pulling out the neutral service vehicle. That's an India.
Ooh, oh,
thank you very much.
That was a bit tight.
It was a bit tight. They're in Tilleur now, or Saint-Nicolas, which is basically the little Italy of Liège. A lot of Italians came up here to work in the period between the wars. It was a huge steel town. Right now there you can see the Italian flags.
The Germans tried to as well, but they were repelled by the Americans.
They certainly were. Armstrong right now realizing it's coming down pretty rapidly. 16 seconds. They really do need to work together, Phil. Sanchez, I think, trying to conserve as much energy as possible. They all realize that Armstrong must attack this climb, and here is the main field charging into town. A lot of work done on the front here by the man who is looking after his leader, Tyler Hamilton, Nicky Sorensen. But I really wonder if this is a good move for these guys at the front here, because at the moment they're closing down to 15 seconds on the leading trio. They're about, I would say, not much more than 500 meters to the right-hand turn, and the climb really does kick in.
And the rain has started just in time for the finish of Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Armstrong just gets on with the job. Whenever he senses a slackening of the pace, he just goes through and carries on setting the pace. Scheffer has sat at the back watching these two riders in tandem. Let's pull back, they're closing in. That has been a violent chase, largely by Sorensen of CSC, but we know now they are bringing some big names back into play here. Bogart is down there, Jan Ullrich is down there, so too is the return of Tyler Hamilton off to the right of our picture, and Michele Bartoli is still in that group, and of course Frank van den Broeke. As we now hit the slopes, there's got to be a huge attack coming off this peloton.
Well, there's got to be a huge move right now. All of these riders feel that there's a chance of winning this bike race once again. Michael Bogart is right in the middle. They're all looking over their shoulders to see who's going to be the first to move. Moving up there into second place is Echavarria. Going off the back, riders have been working to try and pull back the attack of Lance Armstrong. There's not more than 50 meters, Phil. Armstrong is on the front setting the tempo, but it's all quite possibly going to come back together.
Little David Echavarria rues the day in the year 2000 when he was pipped on the line and he finished only second. Now, can he make amends this time around? That was Bettini who'd beat him then, and Bettini was also the winner 1 year ago, but times change. He's out at the moment with injury as the split is on, and look at this. Well, Lance has made his move, Paul, and it may turn out now to be the wrong one.
It looks as if it was a little bit too early right now, because the whole of the group have come back to Armstrong. He was not getting any help at all from Alexander Scheffer. If Scheffer, no, acceleration now coming from Armstrong. He's decided, just as the main field decides to come back to his wheel, that he wants to go for it.
Look at the face of him now. He's let them onto his back wheel and he's putting them all back on the defensive again. But still, Samuel Sanchez is holding that wheel, and for me is still the big danger.
Very strong Sanchez on this bike race this afternoon, and coming up another rider has come onto the tail of Sanchez right now. Difficult to see from this altitude who has made the contact. Armstrong knows it's a do or die effort right now. He's been on the front for about 15 kilometers, and he knows if he wants to win this bike race he has to go alone, but in fact it's one of the iBanesto.com riders.
Well, you know, this is a fearful show of strength again by Lance Armstrong. He's let the whole peloton out. Jan Ullrich is in a little bit of bother here at the back, as now Armstrong puts in that continued acceleration, but he has been joined. It is far from over, done and dusted. There's a number of riders across the gap. Sanchez not prepared to help at all. But this is a long line of riders. It's that Bogart who's also got there now. And now this could become the battle. There's a great rivalry existing at the moment between Bogart and Lance Armstrong.
Well, this is unbelievable. Armstrong has made a huge effort right now, and in fact, Phil, he's disappearing from the leading group of 6 riders. Hamilton is getting onto the back of the group here, but this is a great move by Domino Vacanze.
That's Kobylev. I'm sure that is Kobylev here, the Russian who is on form. Is now trying to break away as well and win Liège-Bastogne-Liège. This race today will not be decided until the final sprint at the line, and it could well be a sprint here.
Well, Michael Bogart now accelerating up through the inside. It's a very difficult part of the climb here right now. Bogart trying to make amends for finishing second last week in Liège-Bastogne-Liège, in Amstel Gold Race, sorry.
Used to be, but now it's the LBL that finishes the season, as now a continued attack again. I think this is another effort now from Sanchez to become over the top of the last official climb, the Côte de Saint-Nicolas. And there is Jan Ullrich, who has shown us again today he is making his steady return to the top of his career.
Well, this is Bogart again looking over his shoulder, trying to see if he can get the gap right now. Armstrong seems to have disappeared, but what a cool move there over the cobblestones by Michael Bogart. A slight bit of daylight between himself and Euskaltel-Euskadi. Moving up there, it looked as if it may well have been the presence of Frank Vandenbroek as well.
It will be just a typical move by Frank if that was the case. As we get here, the roads here a little bit slippery. You've got to be a bit careful now on these roads at the moment because they're not good. And that is Sanchez still in a position of delivering the finest result of his career.
Well, this man here, Bogart, has opened up a lot of advantage now over the dangerous part through those cobblestones. That was a nice move by him.
Well, that was a risky move, but it may have paid off because he took 1 or 2 chances, sweeping away the memories of the Amstel Gold Race. A second place there for him, but now Michael Bogart at 30 years of age is looking extremely sharp. Now, he hasn't been placed in this race since he finished 5th 2 years ago, but this would be, he's been 5th on a couple of occasions, he's had a 2nd, but he's never had the win. And you know, he's chasing now a best result for Holland Paul since Adrie van der Poel back in 1988.
Well, that would be absolutely superb. Little jump at the back wheel there. These roads are very tricky on the outskirts of Liège. We're charging out now towards Ans, and it is a very long, difficult climb up to the finishing straight as well, Phil. We're inside 5 kilometers to go right now. He's looking over his shoulder and he's about to get caught. And I have a feeling, if I'm not mistaken, Armstrong has got himself onto the back end of this group.
6 riders, a bit more than 6, there's 1 or 2 more coming into our picture now. This could well be the biggest sprint we've seen in Liège for many, many years. These riders are reforming.
Well, this really is quite remarkable. It looked as if Armstrong had the race sewn up about 10 kilometers ago, and all of a sudden it came back together on the final climb of the day. Another move going off the front here. This again is the Domino Vacanze rider going forward right now, but it looks to me as if Armstrong has made the junction there, Phil, and he's back in this group just at the tail end there.
8 riders. Lance Armstrong is the last one to huck up, as again someone has flown off the front of this group. We're running out of distance now. Any one of these attacks could be the final one. 3 kilometers to go.
3 kilometers to go right now, but I tell you what, it's a long climb up towards the finishing straight, and then once you get into the finish, this is Tyler Hamilton as well, who's trying to pull himself back into the bike race.
Well, Hamilton it is, but I think he's trying to pull himself away from the bike race, because I think this is the man from the helicopter. We've come down below and Hamilton has been brought back into the race. So the fine pacemaking, which we actually criticised because we thought Sorensen was chasing Hamilton down, was in fact doing the job to bring him back into the action. They're on the slippery stones again now, and the reaction has come once more.
And Armstrong is on the counter-attack right now, which is a pretty impressive move for Armstrong.
There'll be no present for Hamilton, not from Armstrong.
Absolutely not. There's no love lost between them, although they train together. When it comes down to racing, it's a question of American pride here for the moment. There is Hamilton, just off the front of the bike race right now. He's got an advantage of 20 or 30 meters, I think, over Michael Bogart in second position. It looks like Sanchez is coming across again, but they've still got the long 1.5 kilometer drag up towards the finishing straight.
Well, Tyler Hamilton, is he the man? Is he going to be the winner of this extraordinary race? Because if it is, it will be without doubt the finest victory of his career. And he's moved across to the Danish CSC team to do it. As he now continues to cut a lone trail here, the flotilla of motorbikes in front, they really are getting themselves in a bit of a mess just ahead of Hamilton now. He's settled down the slick roads here. He can't afford to make a mistake. As the commissaire now goes through Jean-Marie Leblanc to push everybody out of the way to clear the road. Could this be, Paul, the first American to win?
It's going to be very difficult to catch a man like Tyler Hamilton. He's a brilliant time trialist. Michael Bogart just sneaking up the inside of the motorbike camera there. In fact, it wasn't. It was the iBanesto.com who moved there. The jerseys are so alike this year. It's difficult to see the difference between them. Hamilton is still holding on, Phil, to not a very great advantage, but he's a very good individual time trialist. He started off with second in the prologue of Paris-Nice earlier on this season after 6 months out of competition, and he's the kind of rider who is not likely to falter towards the end.
Well, I think that iBanesto rider is Aitor Gonzalez, and if it is, remember, he was placed second in the flesh. He could do extremely well on the weekend now when they put both races together for an overall prize. This is huge now. Tyler Hamilton at 32 years of age, second in the prologue in Paris-Nice, second overall in the Tour de Pays-Basque, sixth in the Criterium International. No wins this year yet.
Well, I think Tyler Hamilton is going to get it because he's not too far away from the kilometre banner right now. The two riders chasing him are Iban Mayo and Michael Bogart. This is Frank Vandenbroucke, who is in the group as well. There are all kinds of permutations in this bike race, but I think the man who's going to come up with the win right now is Tyler Hamilton, because he still has the advantage, although if it does all come back together, it's going to be absolute chaos. Iban Mayo, Michael Bogart, they are about 20 metres off the front end of that group. And Tyler Hamilton digging very deep now inside of the final kilometre.
Huge effort by Tyler, and let's hope the man from the USA can now do this, because he showed us all there. He dropped off on the climb of the Sartre moment. The pace just hit him too hard. He's recovered. His team raced him back into the action. He's made his move on the final climb of the day. That has got to be a winning move.
He's got a big gap right now. Iban Mayo is getting no help at all here from Michael Bogart, and I think that may well be all Tyler Hamilton needs. All he needs to do is just to get up another 200 or 300 meters, and he will turn left onto the flat finishing straight of Liege, Bastogne Liege. Mayo and Bogart are about 30 meters behind him for the moment, and not very far in front of this group here right now. On the front of the chasing group here is Echevarria. There is the group with Armstrong. This is an unbelievable finish to a 258-kilometer World Cup race, the oldest bike race on the calendar, Liege, Bastogne Liege.
Just what is Tyler thinking here now? He's desperate. He can't go any quicker, but I do think in his favour the two chasers are at 110%. They've got no more effort left in those legs. Tyler has the feeling now of the inspiration of winning the greatest classic, the oldest classic, Liege, Bastogne Liege. I think Bogart would have gone now if he had the legs, Paul. He cannot move around.
He really is suffering. I think everybody's on the complete rivet right now. Hamilton looking over his shoulder. I think he's still got a lot under the bonnet of his motor there, because he's still managing to dig deep. He knows that in a short moment he's going to take it. That's fine. That's a long way back to the two chasers. All he's got to do right now is take the left-hand turn.
Well, he's had some terrific stage racing results, but this, without doubt, his finest ever finish in a single-day event, because it is a win. Liege, Bastogne Liege is going to be a victory in the 89th edition of the event. He becomes the first American cyclist to win this race, and he's done it on a day when he's taken on America's finest in Lance Armstrong. Tyler Hamilton gets the victory for CSC.
Absolutely superb. The big sprint for second place, though, is going to go to Iban Mayo as he accelerates away from Michael Bogart. A superb ride, though, Phil, by Tyler Hamilton. Put into difficulty on the Côte de Sartre-Tillemont, recovered, paced back by his team, and coming up with a counter-attack that gave him the winning move.
And how fitting, the flag flying on the left. Looks like Kobolev there has come up into 4th place, as the riders now just sprinted out across the line.
Casagrande coming in there. Michael Bartoli in that group as well.
I think it might have been Belly, Paul, who just snatched there for Lamprey, but this is the field now completely decimated on that final drag. That's not an official climb, by the way, the finishing one. The face of Lance Armstrong, who rode a brilliant race today. No, it didn't work out in victory, but he's shown us he's bang on course for a great ride in this summer's Tour de France. Just look at the face here of Tyler Hamilton as he drives those last few meters to the greatest win of his career. The man who has finished on the Giro d'Italia with the pink jersey and was ridden so well in that race, but this one is going to be something very, very special. The first American to win the oldest classic of them all. So congratulations then to Tyler Hamilton, and we can now eavesdrop on the interview with him.
Tyler, congratulations, a wonderful victory today, maybe the most beautiful of your life.
Yes, for sure, my most beautiful victory of my career. I didn't believe it. I really didn't believe it until, you know, maybe 50 meters to go when I looked around and I thought there was for sure somebody going to catch me, and the last 2 kilometers were probably the hardest 2 kilometers of my life, but I was really suffering a lot, but I didn't give up and just stayed focused.
What's happened in the end? You know that Armstrong was strong today and you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, Lance was very strong today. I think he was probably the strongest. And when he went before the second to last climb, you know, I didn't chase him because I thought I would have been happy if he won. But once the group behind caught us, I had 3 teammates with me, and it was in our best interest to have to chase. And you know, I kind of felt bad doing that, but you know, you know, CSC is here to win the race, and so we had to do it. But Lance, I think, was the strongest. He was still very strong on the last climb there, and you know, maybe if the roll was a little different, he could have won today.
Before the last climb, you go alone.
Yeah, before the finishing climb, I went alone. A lot of guys were looking at each other, and I thought, why not? Why not try it? And I just put my head down and went as hard as I could, and I won. I can't believe it. I really can't believe it.
Last question. You know that you are the first American to win here?
I didn't know that when I crossed the line, but it's very special. This is an incredible race. I really love Belgium, and the first time I did this race was in 1997, and ever since then it's really had a special place in my heart. So thank you.
So there is the result, a win for the United States, and Tyler Hamilton ahead of Iban Mayo of Spain, and Michael Bogart taking 3rd. Scarponi it was who came in 4th place, Francesco Casagrande 5th, and Samuel Sanchez had a brilliant race towards the end. He finished in 6th place. Competing in the top 10, Ivan Basso finishing in 10th place. He finished 3rd in this race last year. So as we look down on the finishing line, I hope you've enjoyed the coverage of the 89th Liège-Bastogne-Liège. We think it has been something special. This is the latest standing now as we close the Spring Classics for the World Cup competition until after the Tour de France. Van Petegem still the leader there with his 200 points. But this is the face of the American winner today. The first time he's excelled in a one-day classic race, and he's finished right on top. Tyler Hamilton becomes the first American ever to win Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Le The trophy held high by Tyler Hamilton of the United States as he salutes the photographers. And I bet with about 15 miles to go today, he never thought he was going to win this. But he certainly came good in those last few kilometers to the finish. I hope you've enjoyed this special video. On behalf of World Cycling Productions, I'm Phil Liggett with Paul Sherwin saying, see you the next time.